Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the LitRPG Podcast. I am Ramon Mejia, here to bring you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and of course author interviews, and this is episode 111 of the show. Thanks for hanging out with me. Now before we get into those reviews, I want to give a quick shout out to Camilla Richards, our latest Patreon subscriber for the podcast. Thank you, Camilla, for being such a nice lady and supporting the podcast by going to our Patreon at Geek Bites Podcast Patreon and go supporting us there. So thank you very much. It's very kind of you. On to some new releases and reviews though, including we'll have Fractured Spirit, which is Alpha World book number 5, giving the review on that one. Also Fjorgyn, Shifting Sand. Now this is the 3rd book in that series. Also be reviewing Visaria Online, Void. This is the 2nd book in that particular series. And then it'll be Branded, book 1 of the Advocate Saga. Then after that, it'll be You're in Game, book number 2. Now, this is a LitRPG short story collection from Mad Agent Books. After that, it will be Prison Quest. Prison Quest. There's Prison Guard on the cover, but it is entitled Prison Quest. After that, it'll be Welcome to Eden. Then it'll be Temple of Sorrow. Stonehaven League, book number 1. That's the full title. After that, it'll be God of Life, Mythic Online, and last but not least, it'll be Ruins of Majesta, Volume 1, Blood and Cupcakes. So quite the interesting title by cutie member Tajel. So there you go. Okay, before we get into LitRPG reviews, we're going to go, of course, into LitRPG news. And in LitRPG news, we got a first story from Travis Bagwell, author of The Awaken Online. He was nice enough to actually do a cover art review for the 3rd book in that series called Evolution. As always, his covers are always very minimalist, but also very cool and interesting. So it's a very nice cover. He did say, though, that book 3 is going to be coming soon. He did not give a specific date, but he did say that he will be putting up the chapters on Patreon until the novel is actually ready. I think he's trying to time the release of the ebook with the release of the audiobook. He's done the last few times very, very well. I never personally have the patience to wait until the audiobook is ready, because it takes sometimes 4 or 5 weeks, then like more weeks for Audible to approve it. So I'm like, oh, okay, well, I just can't wait. He's a much more patient man. But of course, you can go check out the early release chapters on his Patreon if you want to go support him there. Okay, in other LitRPG news, we have a nice new cover, art from Vasily Mahenko. Last week we showed this exact same picture, only it was the black and white version, or like or white and brown, whatever you want to call it. And this is the colorized version of that same particular piece for Anastasia, who may be called Anastari in the Russian version. But there we go. So very nice detail work. I personally kind of like the black and white version. I'm just more of a fan of that particular style, but this is very nice. I have to say, it's very, very nice. There you go. Okay. In other LitRPG news, we have Brian Ariby. He is a community member of the LitRPG community. He started his own book recommendation site, in addition to traditional categories like science fiction, fantasy, urban fantasy. He also has added LitRPG, Gamelit, and specifically Russian LitRPG as separate categories. The site is still relatively new, and his recommendation list in those particular categories are a little sparse, we'll say. Like, he has about like 7 to 9 titles in any LitRPG category, but he says he does plan to expand his site and his recommendation list in the future. So there you go. So he asked, you have a link in the show notes if you want to go check that out. Okay, in other LitRPG news, we have Michael Ryan, who previously published under the name Jaden Hunter. Recently, he sent me a message letting me know that his novel, The Nagat Wars, was picked up by a small publisher where he lives called Reprobatio Ltd., who decided this series had legs, as he put it. So they did some editing, changed the title, the cover art, and are republishing it. It's now called World War VR, a Gamelit novel. I'll have a link in the show notes if you want to go check it out. Now the author again, Michael Ryan, he not only wrote blog posts in several Facebook groups clarifying that this is a republish. He also said they want to be 100% transparent about the republishing, and then it's mentioned in the novel description too. So there you go. When I asked him what changes were made since the publisher got it, he wrote, and this is his statement, same storyline. The publisher removed all the religious stuff and a ton of editorializing. It's way streamlined. So there you go. Now, he also mentioned that if this one gets a decent reception, he'll likely get the publisher to do a rewrite on book number 2, and he'll even possibly write a third book in that series. Now, this is going to be the third time that this particular story has been published. It was originally published in October 2016, and it got criticism for what some saw as overtly religious commentary. That's what the reviews said, to be honest. Now, the author pulled it from Amazon, and a lot of what was there, it was edited out, along with correcting some technical errors that were there. He republished in January 2017, but the author then got flack for republishing it and not being 100% clear that it was a republish. I think he changed the book title name, and people thought it was actually book 2 in the series. And so then when they just accidentally bought the first book again, they were a little miffed. Now, the second book in the series, The Pawn Sacrifice, was published later on in that same year, and it did not do well in sales for several reasons, some of which I can only speculate about. Personally, I like both books. I thought they were both very interesting in the series. I gave them good review scores personally. I don't mind religious commentary, so I thought that gave it an interesting twist, but I do understand people's issues with it from their point of view. Not everything is written for everybody, in my opinion, but that's fine. Michael Ryan has been doing pretty well actually as a sci-fi writer. He switched from LitRPG to doing some sci-fi fiction stuff, and he's been living pretty well where he lives. So it is interesting to see him potentially return to LitRPG. So there you go. But if you want to go check it out, just be aware that, again, if you've read the Nagat Wards, you already know what the story is, but you haven't. This might be something interesting for you to pick up. I personally won't be reading and review just because I've done it twice for this story. So I'm like, okay, that's cool. If he ever puts out a third book, I will probably read that one though. So there you go. Okay, on to our last bit of LitRPG news. Jeff Hayes, the audiobook narrator extraordinaire, is not only producing the audiobook for Harmon Cooper's upcoming novel Monster Hunter NYC, but he's also producing some original music for it. It's actually a really interesting collaboration between the two. They're doing something a little more experimental in that they're adding in this theme music to the novel. So I'm genuinely curious to hear what it sounds like, how different it's going to be from the written version of that particular book, or if there's going to be links in the book to the actual song somewhere else that people can listen to while they're reading the ebook or something. I'm hoping it's a cool experiment. It's a little experimental, but I'm kind of excited to do it and to read it, I should say. Jeff Hayes also said that he's released a sample of this music on SoundCloud for us to listen to, and he's even contemplating creating a full album of songs themed to this particular novel. So I'm really supportive of that. I would absolutely love to listen to that. I would personally pay for it, but that's more along the lines I'm supporting Jeff Hayes. Who I consider a friend of mine. We met at Dragon Con, so FYI, if you're full disclosure. But this is some interesting music. I'm going to play a bit for you so you can kind of see what's there. And if you like the songs, if you like the music, let Jeff Hayes know on Facebook or on Sound with Theater Live or Sound with Theater Facebook page, and let him know that you enjoyed it so he knows that there's interest.
I am with you, you are with me, even though I can't see you. I know you're there. I know you're there. Ooh, I know you're there. I know you're there. Ooh, I know you're there. I know you're there. I can feel you, you can feel me, even though I can't see you. I know you're there. I know you're there. I know you're there. I know you're there. Ooh, I know you're there. I know you're there.
So there you go, folks. So that was a nice sample from Jeff Hayes for that particular project. Okay, on to some stuff that's going to come out now recently in LitRPG stuff. I just haven't had a chance to read it all, but it is out currently, including Eden's Gate, The Arena by Edward Brody. That's the 4th book in that series that is out now, so go check that out. Also out is Catmaster Online by A.J. Chaudhuri. You might have recognized that name from another Indian-themed LitRPG series he did. We also have New Life Online, a LitRPG novel. This one was a little harder to find on Amazon, so that's why it's here. As was Everwood Falls. Again, not something I found on the regular Kindle store Amazon search for LitRPG. I had to actually look in a different category for it specifically, but here it is. It is out as well. Also out is Endless Online, Oblivion Blade. Another LitRPG novel that doesn't show up directly on the Amazon search page for LitRPG directly, so but it is out as well. So there you go. New audiobooks that are out for LitRPG stuff. We have Accidental War. This is the 2nd book in this particular series. It is available as an audiobook, as is Continue Online, part number 5 together. So there we go. By Stone Morse. I enjoyed the heck out of that entire series. Happy to see that it's actually getting an audiobook edition for all of the pieces. Okay, also out as a LitRPG audiobook is The Metropolis, The Laboratory, book number 4 by Skylar Grant. So there you go. I think that catches it up, if I'm not mistaken. I could be mistaken. Okay, and on to upcoming LitRPG. This is just a list of stuff I know it's coming out in the near future. Feel free to skip ahead of it, but there are a few date changes for these titles and also some new stuff. Blind Gambit changed the date from its release date from May the 10th to May the 5th, so it's coming out just in the next couple of days now. So that'll be out very soon. Questmaster is going to be out the same date, May the 11th. Mightier Still is still going to be out on May the 10th as well, as is Monster Hunter New York Sea by Herman Cooper. It'll be out on May the 10th. On May the 11th, the 3rd book in the Warriors Academy series, Tournament of Heroes, Hiroes. It's a nice twist. That's the character's name there. But that'll be out on May the 11th if you're a fan of that series. I know I am. Let's see, on May the 15th, this is a new edition of the series. It'll be the list, I should say, Goblin King, Monster Slayers Online, book number 1 by R.R. Verity. On May the 15th. On May the 17th, World of Karnak Book 2 is still there. This one is also a new addition to the list. Out on May the 22nd, a new title from Litworld called Gestation, Project Chrysalis, book number 1. If you look at that cover, it's kind of creepy. The novel description is equally creepy. It describes want to have a good time with the kids. I don't know, get trapped in the game with them, I guess. But that's literally what some of that novel description says. So I'm kind of curious to see if, I don't know if this is horror or something, or this is a family thing that connects with children and their parents getting trapped in the games. I don't know. I really don't. But it has my interest. So there is that. Out on May 24th is still God Mode, Alter Game Book 3. May 27th, Kingdom Level 5 is out. May 28th, Trial by Fire, also out. May 30th, The Dead Rogue, that'll be out as well still, same time frame. May 31st, Pangea Online, book number 2, Magic and Mayhem. July the 10th, Restart Level Up, book number 1. Now, actually, there's if you're curious about what the story is about, Magic Jump Books just recently released the first, I think, couple chapters for this book on their page at magicjumpbooks.com. So feel free to go over there and check them out. I'm pretty sure it's the .com, might be something else, but Magic Jump Books. You can get the first couple chapters and see if you like it. There's also a short story from this novel in one of the reviews we'll be doing today on that short story collection. So, and this one is new to be July the 23rd for External Threat Reality Benders, book number 2. We recently reviewed book number 1, and I'm definitely looking forward to reading book number 2. Also, apparently, side note, this green chick at the top, not in the story. Who knew? Apparently, that was an artist addition to the entire thing. So, hey, artists do fun things sometimes. And that'll be it for LitRPG news and all that other stuff. On to new releases and reviews. Hey, we're back. And in new releases and reviews, we're going to begin with Fractured Spirit, book number 5 by Daniel Stonehaven. This is the 5th book in the Alpha World series. So there you go. Very nice cover art. Now, full disclosure, I received an advance copy for review. I purchased it when it became available. I totally forgot to add all the other parts of this review, including like the novel description and like the page count and everything. So I'm going to have to pull it up as we work. This one is not listed a page count. I'm going to estimate, though, it's probably about 350 to 400 pages. It is $4.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Here is the author's description. Fresh from the success of capturing Gwaine Keep, Alpha Company is in high spirits. Flush with coin, everyone is eager to get gear and see what new zones they can go find in. Not everything is roses, though. As the first testing phase is about to come to an end, a number of those who ventured forth with the guild are about to return to their regular lives. And the next wave of testers brings even more players to embrace Alpha World as their new reality, if only for a limited time. Albert has some new complications to deal with, but he doesn't have to face them alone. 2 other loving women whom he's accepted the love of, Fluffball and Karen, will be at his side as the revelations of his past come out. Will Albert be able to handle what he has hidden from himself? Will the love of the trio of women beside him? With the love of the trio of women beside him, or will he break and fail, leaving his spirit fractured? Hence the title name. The author does warn that the novel contains adult themes. These are his words. It says, "You think I could stop with these disclaimers, but even this far in the series, people are shocked by the content. This book contains polyamorous relationships, with one of the 4 people in it being a succubus. You have been warned." You really would think that people this far into this series would recognize that that's a thing here. But hey, it is what it is. So there you go. I'd also warn that there are sexy scenes in the story, and there also are moments that may bring you to tears for other reasons. So that's my own disclaimer. Okay. The first part of the story has a lot of cleanup for book number 4. What I mean by that is that of the events that happened in book 4, the results are coming in here, and the author in the beginning of the novel is dealing with all those things, quest reward that's being handed out, training, getting new gear, set up for future storylines, and of course the consequences of actually completing that major quest at the end of book 4. So that's a lot of what the beginning of this novel is. Now, in addition to that, the story kind of focuses on a couple different themes. The biggest one are these emotional moments that really do have some readers crying, apparently. I wasn't one of those people, although the author did tell me personally, he's like, "Ramon, I hope this book makes you cry, because maybe then I'll get an 8. Sorry, man, didn't quite work that way for me. Good emotional moments. I'm not saying they're not. They didn't hit that particular level of make me cry though. Now, the latest entry in this series, this book, again, revolves heavily around dealing with the psychological issues that the main character has. Although the last few novels, throughout the last few novels, there's been emotional and memory exploration of each of the women that the main character loves. We've seen their tragic past and the source of their issues, and this time the same mechanic is used to probe the issues of the main character. I said, I'll be honest, the first emotional moment, it landed a little bit flat for me, and there's a couple reasons for that. One, the author did a really good job, in my opinion, of foreshadowing what that emotional moment was. It wasn't a surprise to me. I've read all the other books, and there were hints throughout them that this was going to be the case. So, additionally, there wasn't a lot of buildup, in my opinion, in this novel. My guess is that the author wrote book 4 and 5 one after the other, and so for him, all the stuff from book 4 really was lead up into book 5. But for me, it's been months and months since I read that book, so a lot of that emotional build up from book 4 has dissipated for me, at least, which is why that first revelation didn't really hit me with the oomph that I think the author is hoping for. But there's a lot of other revelations. There are a lot of other emotional moments. And by the last one, I was also shaking my fist at the author for saying how cruel he was to his main character. And while I didn't cry, it gave me the sniffles. So it did have an impact on me as a reader. But I'll be honest, the author's doing some George R. Martin level stuff to this character. And I'm like, oh, that is cruel, man. That is cruel. So, okay. So that's definitely one of the highlights of this novel. This novel is also one of the less action-oriented entries in this series. There are a couple fighting sections, one very early on that's a little short, and one very much later in the novel that's a good chunk of space. Like, it's 15% of the novel, but they are separated by like a lot of upkeep, a lot of like future story plans, and a lot of like these emotional advancements for the characters, and like some story advancements as well. So just be aware that that's what this is. So again, and it's not bad or anything, it's just, that's what this is. Overall, I like the story. I really did. If you've read the other novels in this series, you're probably already a fan if you're here by book 5. And this is a good entry in the series. It's just, again, good for different reasons than, ooh, let's kill stuff and level. That's definitely part of it, but it's a relatively much smaller part of this. And that's, again, not necessarily a bad thing. I actually liked that a lot of the story was more character driven and more story based than just like the action stuff necessarily. So there you go. That's it. I had a good time reading it. Gets a score 7 out of 10. That's Fractured Spirit, Alpha World, book number 5 with a score 7 out of 10. And if we were scaling, I'd be like 7.5. Pretty decent. Right in the middle of that. Like, good stuff. Okay. On to the next story. Fjorgyn, Shifting Sands. This is book number 3 in the Fjorgyn series. That's what I'm titling because the author never puts it's a Fjorgyn series book. So it's sometimes hard to like actually see it on the Amazon search results as book 3 in the series. Written by R.J. Now, the author made sure to send me a note about this. It is Castelline. R.J. Castelline. I say Castiglione all the time because I'm Hispanic and I pronounce all the letters, but it is Castelline. The author was nice enough to send me a note to make sure I knew how to say it correctly. It is 229 pages, $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. And here is the author's description. Winter is coming to the Shroud, and it brings with it conditions Michael and his allies cannot withstand. Greenleaf's clan is at risk and must flee south or else suffer death. That actually does sound like it should be like a deeper voice. Like, let's try it again. Winter is coming to the Shrouds and brings with it conditions Michael and his allies cannot withstand. Greenleaf's clan is at risk and must flee south or else suffer death. Yeah, that sound good. Sorry. Michael's mission for, this is a hard word, Slanderithier. Regalia also pulls his friends and himself and away from Breckenville's safety. With Clifford, Rain, Ash, and Rita in tow, he ventures into the abandoned lands in a vast desert where he must face enemies more dangerous than any he has battled before. And all the while, Enco Levent's forces out on the Athalia expand across Vros like a blight. Okay, that's what it says. If Michael fails to stop him, no one, not even his friends in the valley, will be safe. Michael needs to become stronger. If he does not, all will be lost. Like, there's a lot of proper names in there that I'm not sure how to pronounce anymore. So that's what it is. That's actually another comment I have in the review. Okay. The novel starts off right off the bat with a bit of herbalism and potion making. And I'm going to be honest. I think that this section exists just because the author knows that I love this stuff so much. Because it's not a real big emphasis for the rest of the novel. So I feel like he front loaded and said, Ramon, this is for you, man. And it worked. I really did love that part. I don't know why, but the author has such a way of describing herbalism and the potion making that he does in these stories. It's so detailed and well described that I feel like I'm there. Like, I feel like if I follow this recipe, I would actually make a health potion or a flame potion or a fire stone skin potion, whatever. And it's definitely one of like the highlights, at least for me, being a crafting nerd. That's about this series that I really like. Now, beyond that, because again, it's really just something happens at the beginning. Beyond that, much of the story is a novel is cleanup, working out issues created from book number 2, and then it shifts right into a travel story with lots of action, adventure, and a few tearjerker moments. Like a lot of the story is a travel story. Remember in Lord of the Rings, like when all those characters are on that journey to go a place and things just happen along the road, but it's still about like getting somewhere in particular and doing a special event. That's what this is. That's what a lot of this novel is. And that's totally cool. It's just the particular type of style of the novel. One of the like most impactful moments, or I should say not necessarily impactful, but the ones that made me like, oh, maybe get a little emotional, was the one where the main character gets a chance to see his family on Earth again. Remember, in the context of this particular story, as far as he's aware, everybody's been dead for thousands of years. And so his entire family is gone from his point of view. So in the course of the story, he gets to see them again. And it's kind of a real what if kind of scene. I thought, that was really emotionally touching. So I'm like, good job on that, Castelline. The rest of the novel, of course, is really entertaining as well. And there's definitely, if you know these characters and you've come to love them by name, there's definitely some parts in the end near that's going to make you a little sad. So just a heads up about that. So there. One of the few notes that I kind of give for the stories in general, the beginning one was a little difficult to remember who everybody was. It's been a little while since I've read an entry in this novel, or in this series, I should say. And especially some of the proper faction names and who they're related to and what they're doing. I kind of had to go and look up information to remind myself, who are these people? Like I said at the beginning of that novel description, like a lot of those names were like, who is that again? And who is that? And what's that faction? And I think it's just like a little bit of a summary of like, this has happened in book 1 and in book 2, this happened. And maybe a character would have really helped jog my memory personally of like, who everybody was, their relationships, their connections, and who all these factions, because they're the proper names used, who these actual factions are. So that would just help a little bit. Eventually, as the story goes on, your memory does get jogged. So it's not like it's too big of an issue. It's just that, the beginning was a little rough on my old man brain. To recall everybody's names, everybody's relationships. So that's it. But other than that, like everything was really entertaining. Overall good stuff. If you're if you're in book 3 in this series, you probably already like it. So this is an interesting section. Again, I do have to, for some reason, warn people that, there's a main character is gay. He has a relationship with another dude. That's a part of the story. And it's a part of the story that I personally like. I like the fact that this is a good, healthy relationship, and there's relationship stuff here. But I know some other people have issue with it, so it's the only reason I ever mention it. And again, no judgment on that. Just, I recognize that people have different things that they do and do not like. For me, had a good time with it, though. Score 7 out of 10. Definitely hitting on about the 7.4, 7.5 range-ish. That's Fjorgyn Shifting Sands with the score 7 out of 10. So there you go. On to review number 3, Visaria Online Void, a LitRPG fantasy adventure book number 2 by Riley Morrison. Okay, this one is about 150 pages. Again, as of this recording, there is no official Amazon page count, but I'm guessing it's about 150 pages. It is $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. So this is almost like a short story entry in a serial story, but I mean, it's a bit longer than a short story. So I'm not sure what that would be. Novella, novelette, they're technical words. Here's the author's description. As war spreads throughout Visaria Online, the shadow of the void looms menacingly on the horizon. Banished from his homeland, Ajax must go on the run, gathering allies, new items, and facing high-level players hell-bent on his destruction. Handed by the Imperium, the minions of the void, and an angry, nosy old dragon, Ajax and Lilith flee into outdated expansion content. In the desolate expansion zone, they discover something that could turn the tides of the coming war. But with the void and the Imperium hot on his heels, Ajax might not live long enough to use it. There you go. Okay, overall, this one was kind of a iffy read for me in the first place. Like, I liked book 1 just enough. I gave it like a 6 out of 10. I'm like, I think this is just enough to try out book number 2. Book number 2 kind of left me in the same place. Like, this is okay. It's not boring. It just wasn't good for me. The novel is mostly a journey story about getting Ajax to the Oracle. The game mechanics are the same. There's nothing wrong with the game mechanics. Lots of good detail there. That's fine. No complaints there at all. But for me, the story still has the same issues as book 1 had, where I feel like the main character is really being forced down a particular path. Like, for some reason, in this particular instance, the chosen one kind of storyline just doesn't really work for me. Like, my favorite part of book 1 was before that chosen one stuff happened, when it felt like a slice of life. Like, these characters were exploring this world and going on adventures and doing some very interesting things and improving their relationship and kind of stuff. And that, for me, really sort of took a back seat to this chosen one storyline in book 1 when it came out. Like, when it's like, we have to go save the world from these evil void creatures, otherwise it's going to be destroyed. The Oracle says, that really like just knocked it like, oh, he's going to go down a path and he has to get there. And that's ultimately outside of his realm of control for a lot of things. And for me, that just doesn't work for some reason. It's a thing. Some other people may enjoy this more than I did. But for me, it was a 6 out of 10. Again, not boring. Just didn't really work for me. So 6 out of 10 for Visaria Online, The Void, a LitRPG fantasy adventure book number 2. So I don't think I'll be reading book number 3. Okay, on to Branded, book number 1 of the Advocate series, written by Outspan Foster. So there you go. It is 161 pages, $2.99. It is not available on Kindle Unlimited. Now this author does this on a fairly regular basis. If you've read the Slime series that he's done and some other stuff, you'll know that this author also puts his books up on like Royal Road and some other places for free. And he doesn't do Kindle Unlimited because if he did, he'd have to take all that off. And he kind of feels like, in part or partially, I think, that he'd be doing the people who supported him on the Royal Road a disservice by taking them down. Personal choice. It's, it is what it is. Here's the author's description. Catstone just wants to leave her magical past behind and live the simple life of a professional smuggler. But when a monster from the world she abandoned begins killing her friends, she realizes that the past she buried is beginning to dig itself up. Cat is the only one who knows the monster is just the beginning, with an unknown enemy controlling it from the shadows. Caught between her new life and the one she's worked so hard to forget, Cat will be forced to decide facing the killer and its monsters or handing the problem off to a higher authority breathing down her neck. With a monster on the hunt in her city, she is running out of time and choices. Will Cat be able to find the key from her past to take down the monster? Or will the mysterious enemy kill the last of her friends? So there you go. Okay. This is again from the author of Slime. This is an interesting mix of urban fantasy, mystery, and real life RPG powers, which I actually think is a really unique choice. And it's a very interesting, for me at least. It's exciting in that the author is taking a risk and trying to combine these different genres, because not every genre seems to mix well with LitRPG. Like, I've read a lot of cyber thrillers that try to use LitRPG because, again, the cyber portion of it, for some reason, I think that makes well, and I've seen very few of them do well. Urban fantasy seems like it might be a better mix with like real life RPG powers, because it kind of fits in like that whole mystery magic thing anyways. And, the mystery aspect also works well here. You get your first 10 glimpse of RPG powers with quest notifications in the first few pages of the story. But honestly, the RPG stuff comes out mostly during the story's few combat scenes. Heck, after those few quest notifications, you don't really see the RPG powers again until like the 17% mark. And after that, they pop in and out, and you see a lot more of them in the last act of the story. And again, this is kind of the compromise, or at least the experimental part of what Outspan Foster does, is that, again, he's mixing urban fantasy, mystery, and RPG stuff. In this case, the main character having RPG powers, which is still LitRPG to me. It's just that he's working on like this balancing act between them, and kind of deciding as he goes along which parts he's going to emphasize. And the very early parts of the story are definitely emphasis in like urban fantasy and urban mystery stuff. So be aware of that. But the RPG stuff is there. It does come out more, but overall, in comparison to other stories, which are just LitRPG stories, this one is relatively lighter on that side. And in the context of the story, it makes sense why it is. Like, slightly spoilery, the main character's RPG powers are locked for a little bit of the story, and later on she works out a way to advance. But that's again in context of the story. Now, the story itself again is mostly like an urban fantasy mystery. The main character, Catstone, has RPG powers and is trying to figure out who or what is killing off her former crew. She has the FBI hounding her, but that's just outside their jurisdiction. Instead, it's a part of a lot of the stories about a secret magical and portal community, and hence the urban fantasy aspect. Like I said, it's a really good attempt to mash these things together. Overall, I had a good time with the story. I did. I kind of had to push my way through kind of the beginning a little bit, because again, it was more overly mysterious. But once I actually started seeing those RPG powers in there, about 17%, I was like, oh yeah, this is cool. I'm here for the ride. And that's kind of what it was for me. It was a very interesting story. Again, I think the author did eventually find a really good balance between urban fantasy and LitRPG. It just took a little bit of the story to kind of set it up. And the ending of the story actually does hold promise, at least for me, of like seeing more of this RPG power stuff come into play from like the beginning of book number 2, since, you know, the author doesn't have to kind of hide it anymore to be mysterious for the story. For me, I had a good time with it. Gets a score of 7 out of 10. That's branded. Book 1 of the Advocate Saga with a score of 7 out of 10. So there you go. Okay, next review. You're in Game, book number 2. And it is heard that, as I said, I'm like, that sounds different than I thought than I meant it. You are in game. So there you go. This is the second collection of short stories. They're all from Russian authors that have been translated from Russian in English by Magic Books. It is 365 pages, $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. And I'll be honest, instead of reading the novel description, because again, it's a collection of short stories, I'm actually just going to go right into the thing, because I'll name the authors and like each little short story, and I kind of give you like a review of each one of them as far as like what my thoughts were and a score for them. Because again, it's one of those things, like with any kind of anthology collection, it kind of depends on which short story. Some of them are going to hit for you, some of them are going to miss all the time, and it's really going to kind of depend. This is a collection of 8 short stories, again, from Russian authors. Oh, before I forget, full disclosure, I received a man's copy for review. I purchased it when they became available. Magic Books like to send me stuff. I always pay for it eventually, so it's not too big of a deal. But again, 8 short stories from Russian authors. Most of these stories are pulling from already established LitRPG series, and either tell like small side stories or like stories about side characters or events like in between books. But like your enjoyment of them is kind of going to depend on whether or not you like the original series first, for the most part. There are, again, 2 unassociated LitRPG stories which are supposed to be original, so that's a plus for me. The first story is Archibald by Vasily Mihenko. This is from the Dark Paladin series. It's kind of just this okay side story that gives you more detail about the third book in the series a little bit. It didn't really land for me. I wasn't bored or anything. If you really like the Dark Paladin series, you're going to like this. The Dark Paladin series, to me, while I enjoyed it, it's hard to get into because a lot of it is original game concepts, and they're harder for people to relate to because, again, they are so specialized. And I think that's kind of a draw away from some people. For me, this one just didn't land. It gets a score of 6 out of 10. The second book, short story in that collection, is The Dark Knight by Andrea Leveti from the Neuro series. It is the story of White leveling, trying to find his daughter. It's kind of an in-between story between books and 2 in that series. Again, didn't really land. I don't really like this character. I don't care about him. So that kind of put it out for me. But if you really love that character, you might like this. But for me, it gets a score of 6 out of 10. The third story in that short series is The Terror Slayer, rather, by Alexei Ozachuk. That's the Mirror World series. And this one I actually liked. I thought it was really cute. It doesn't depend upon your knowledge of the series so much. But if you've read the story, if you've read the series before, you'll note who this character is. Like, oh, that's cool backstory. And you have like an extra level of enjoyment. But it's basically Anton, the game designer. He's adjusting the intelligence of a particular mob called a Dwand. And he intends to change the intelligence of the character from like a 9 to a 6. But instead, because somebody calls him, he accidentally presses the 6 twice, giving an intelligence level of 66. So that NPC character, that monster, the Dwand, gains sentience. And he starts to be able to see the game notifications, get skill increases, experience points. And it's kind of like this new player experience, except that it's from the point of view of an NPC monster. And again, it's an enjoyable story. I think this is one of my favorites of the collection. Gets a score of 7 out of 10. The next story is Reality's Edge by Pavel Kornev. This is an unassociated LitRPG story. This one's the most boring for me, mostly because, one, it's super short. Like, it's the shortest of any of the short stories in this collection. And I'm not really sure what it is. There are 2 parts of it. It's like a one world part at the end and one game part. But the game part's mostly just like them. It's a squad of players doing stuff, capturing villains, whatever the case is. But it's super short, and then it goes into this cliffhanger, and it was like, oh, someone in the real world is attacking our ship. We have to do something. The end. So I'm like, yeah, okay. So for me, it didn't work at all. Got a score of 5 out of 10. Thought it was kind of boring because I don't have context for like what any of that stuff means. So it is what it is. The next one was from the Alter Games series, Who Fed the Troll by Andrew Novak. It's a side story for Jack the Tramp, where he has to deal with a well-fed troll blocking the entrance to a quest. It was entertaining, mostly because it was short. It kind of had a point, but it also had some humor to it. So it was a nice little mix for me. Score is 7 out of 10. You kind of have to know the series and the character to really like it, though, I think. The short story after that is Level Up, fight set up by Dan Sergolonioff. It's from the upcoming Level Up series, which I mentioned before when I talked about when it's coming out. I actually like this one a lot. It's really enjoyable. It feels not so much like a short story as the first chapter in the upcoming LitRPG story, and it mixes real life RPG with boxing, which works for me. I like anime. I like Rocky. I like the Rocky movies. I like the anime series Hajime no Ippo, which is a boxing anime. So this kind of definitely fits into like my wheelhouse of interest. Plus LitRPG. So who doesn't? I mean, how can I not enjoy it? But this is a very interesting short story. It turns out it's not the first chapter of the new book, but it's for another character in that story. It's just like his perspective of these things that happen at the beginning. So good for me. Score 7 out of 10. I had a good time with it. The next one's called The Khaki Colored Noob by Vasily Mahenko and Eugenia Dmitrieva. Sorry if I'm saying the name wrong. It's a LitRPG short story set in Barleona, which is the fictional game world from Way the Shaman. But it doesn't not have any of the Way the Shaman characters in it, so that's why it's still an independent story. It's a story about a soldier on leave who's convinced by his friends to play the VR MMO set in Barleona. It starts out a little bit slow, I'll be honest, but it gets really good. You don't have to have read the main series at all to enjoy it. It's good, actiony, and it has an interesting twist in there, so nice. Score 7 out of 10. Next is Save the Dynasty by Michael Antomonov. This is the last short story in the collection. It takes place, it pulls from the Reality Benders series, which is a new series that the author just put out recently. I reviewed it, gave it a good score. But it's a short story from the point of view of the Dark Faction in the novel. It takes place right after book 1, but before book 2, I believe. The Dark Faction is looking for retribution after the last loss, but there are plans afoot. Really good stuff. And definitely my favorite from the entire collection here. However, you're going to be completely lost if you haven't read book 1 of the series. So just kind of an FYI, but really enjoyable. Makes me want to read book 2 more, actually. So, which is kind of the point, I'm sure. Good to score 7 out of 10 for me. So there you go. Overall, I liked more of these stories than they didn't. But again, if you've never read a lot of these main series that they're pulling from, there's only kind of 1 or 2 that you can kind of read and still enjoy as independent stories. So that's a reality. For me, gets a score of 7 out of 10. Definitely hits about the 7.34 range for me. So score 7 out of 10 for Your In Game, book number 2, More LitRPG Stories in Your Favorite Worlds. That's the title of it. There you go. Okay, next. Review number 6. Prison Quest, a sci-fi LitRPG adventure written by Saffron Bryant and Mikey Campling. There you go. Okay, this one is 480 pages, $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the short novel description. Cody works the personal security deal at the mighty Vortex Corporation, but when the man she's paid to protect is found dead, her life is ripped apart. Framed for murder, she's incarcerated in a virtual world where she must fight to survive, but perhaps she might stand a chance of escape if only she can complete the prison quest. There you go. And I'll be honest, the cover threw me off. I thought this was going to be some sci-fi story, and it turns out more to feel like a westernish kind of story in game once they're there. So just be aware. Okay, this one. Okay, now I'll be able to forewarn you. This story already had of a weird frame of reference when I was reading it. It felt a little shady when I was looking at the reviews for this. The novel came out on April the 30th, and it already had 3 5-star reviews, all of which were dated before the 30th. One of which gushed about how she had checked out the story because it was on Kindle Unlimited. However, the review was posted 3 days again before the ebook came out, and it was for the print edition of the novel. Another reviewer said that it was the best she'd ever read in the LitRPG genre, except that it's the only story she's ever reviewed in the LitRPG genre. And again, none of that really means anything. It could be a very big coincidence, but it kind of put me in a very interesting frame of mind when I've actually read the novel. So The novel itself is a cyber thriller beginning. Security guard Cody again stumbles into the corpse of her murdered friend. She's immediately arrested by internal security, but instead of being turned over to the policeman that arrives there, she's falsely convicted by internal security and sentenced to 40 years in jail, in the game, rather, in a game. Once she's there, she finds out that she dies outside of town. She dies permanently in real life. She learns of a secret rumored quest that will let her escape from the game if she can find it and beat it. And that's basically what the story is. The game mechanics, and honestly, that beginning is a little weird and it doesn't really make sense to me, but that is what it is. The game mechanic wise, the game mechanics are kind of shallow. There are stats and levels, but they don't really feel like they matter, at least to me. There are quests, character sheets, XP is given, and levels are gained. So this is, again, technically LitRPG. It is. But the game stuff is honestly ignored if like a particular point needs to be reached, whether it's the main character, again, Cody being able to beat a much higher level opponent, or just miraculously surviving a situation where she should have died. And again, that's one of the consequences of making permadeath a part of your story. It never really makes sense to me, because one of the big things about video games is that death is a learning experience. And so why people don't ever want to use it, I don't ever understand. If people are in a video game, let them die, let them learn from it, make that part of their, character growth arc or something. But because it's not, because if they die in the game, they die in real life, like you always know that this character just can't die. And even in like super horrible situations, like where the odds are against her, she's going to survive, and she does by sometimes some very wavy stuff happening. So there you go. A lot of the story, I should say, feels like game notifications were sometimes very inserted after the story was written. Just an opinion, of course. Overall, for me, the action goes from like mediocre to sometimes very entertaining, but those are rare moments for me. And it feels like it's just bookended by cyber thriller, and not particularly good cyber thriller at that. The ending also of this novel was very frustrating, at least for me. And it felt very forced. I felt like the main character at the very end of the novel was literally pushed to the conclusion that occurred. I don't want to spoil it for you if you want to read this. But it was a very unsatisfying conclusion and resolution of the story, I have to say. And the bad guys don't get their just desserts at the end of the story, which was part of my frustration. I'm like, oh, that's disappointing. And it just kind of felt like the story was pushed to an ending. I honestly feel like the author got bored of writing this or something, because it really does have like a really kind of sudden ending. And the resolution is very like, oh, by the way, the end. And I'm like, okay, it is what it is. It didn't work for me. I was kind of bored through a lot of it. So I get score 5 out of 10 for me. Maybe this will work better for you, but it didn't work for me really at all. Again, not bad writing, nothing particularly negative to say, but it just wasn't entertaining for me. So score 5 out of 10. That's Prison Quest, a sci-fi LitRPG adventure with a score of 5 out of 10. Okay, book number 7. This one is called Welcome to Eden by David Lingard. It is 253 pages for $4.19, which seems like a weird number, but it's also relatively appropriate for the Patreon. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. The board of directors of Swarm Entertainment had been working on a singular goal for nearly 10 years when the breakthrough had come. Since the first computer release of VR systems, many had realized that the future of VR gaming would always be total immersion, but very few had thought along the same lines as Swarm Entertainment. The singular goal of Swarm was to eventually create a world where the physical restrictions of the human body would no longer apply. If a person was in a wheelchair, they would be able to walk. If a person was blind or deaf, they could escape their nursing home into a new life where they could enjoy anything and everything they could ever wanted. This was the main goal behind creating Eden, and the possibilities were absolutely endless. This story follows William, a clever man who had led the development team for 6 years and had been handed the pleasure of entering the virtual world of Eden and its virgin lands before any other human being. He would be the first visitor to unknown computer-generated lands, but he won't be welcomed with adoration. Okay, so there's a lot of interesting promise there, and almost none of that is delivered. I'll have to say, the beginning, to be blunt, is boring and kind of tedious. The story does get better about the 22% mark when the reader finally sees like character sheets and the main character William gets some kind of explanation about like the RPG mechanics of the world. The story it picks up the pace and it feels more interesting to me, at least. But everything before that, I'm like, holy Toledo, this is a lot of words to describe things that don't need to be that wordy. I think that's part of the problem, at least for me, is that the novel starts with a long-winded and improbable premise of a game company letting an AI create her own world and evolve it by speeding up time in the simulation so that hundreds of thousands of years will have passed. And again, there's a whole lot of information about why they want to do this, to help people with disabilities and make it great, and et cetera, et cetera. And ultimately, none of that matters to the story. Like 0% of that, like intent stuff really matters. Then there's like this whole long-winded spiel about how they let the AI create their own world and et cetera, and let hundreds of thousands of years pass so she create an original concept and create her own evolutions and things like that. Only none of the developers know what the results are. Like, they literally say in the story that they intentionally let her do whatever she wanted with no interference. So it would be like an original concept, and she would, they give her parameters, of course. And so when the lead designer, our main character, goes into the story, he's supposed to be the first human to jump into the full reality, full immersion game, except that once you're inside the game, it's not original at all. It's basically just a regular standard fantasy world. And it kind of makes that whole 100,000 year natural evolution spiel, which was significantly long, feel like a complete waste of time. Like, they're just elves and dwarves and there are a few like original fantasy creatures, but most of them are just like, oh, it's a giant spider. Great 100,000 years of evolution on your own. You came up with a giant spider. And like I said, it was just a little tedious at the beginning of the story. But after that 20% mark, the story really legitimately does become a bit more entertaining. A few things in the story that bothered me. I think I've already mentioned them a little bit. It stretches the level of disbelief that the lead designer for a game company wouldn't have any idea or any way of seeing inside the game world how it was being made, and he has absolutely no idea how RPG mechanics work. Like, you're a game designer and you have no idea what these things are in the world, and you have no idea of any of the game mechanics that your AI created? Okay, sure. Again, the beginning is kind of long-winded. I talked about it a little bit. Like, it's especially long. Like, I think the biggest example for me was like, the author spends about a good page of a story, like a full paragraph, describing how the main character walks around his camp in a circle. Not like what he sees necessarily, but like the radius of the circle and what area he's covered, how much it amounts to, and the calculations that go into it. A lot of stuff like that probably could have been edited out. Much of the story also reads like straight fantasy with interspersed sections of RPG notifications and character sheet updates. And again, that's just a style choice. A lot of the story does read like a fantasy. It reads like, oh, here's fantasy stuff about elves, dwarves, here's the kingdom, here's like the description of the world. And then there's like, oh, combat. A little RPGness there, and then like, oh, he leveled up. He got to look at it. Let's look at his character sheet and see what abilities he gets, and then we'll go back to our fantasy story a little bit. And it kind of goes back and forth in that. And so, not my favorite thing to do, because it makes the game mechanics feel like they don't really matter to the story if you're not even addressing them on a fairly regular basis, or you're not making like the core part of like, oh, this is a story. The game mechanics matter to the story. No, it's more like, oh, here's our fantasy story with like, oh, here's a break in the fantasy story for some RPG stuff, and we're going to go back to the fantasy story in a second. And that's what a lot of the story feels like. Now, the RPG mechanics in the story, again, don't really feel like they matter, at least to me. Eventually, the main character gets in some fights. He even levels, so again, technically LitRPG, but he consistently beats monsters at a higher level than with like single shots. And there are circumstances where that can work out, and it's like technically plausible depending on how you're setting up your game world, but there is no setup here for that. It's really on lines like, oh, he's level 1 and he beats like a level 4 or 5 monster by the monster impaling itself and consistently impaling itself on a stick that he has until it kills itself. And then the main character gets credit for that kill. And when you look at the main character looks at the game notifications, like the damage notification says, oh, he did 1,000 points of damage and killed this monster. Here's some XP. And that I'm like, oh, that's the game mechanics don't matter at all here sometimes in combat. And that to me is not enjoyable for me. And additionally, as the main character levels, he's supposed to be adding stats to his character sheet, which is set up a little bit differently, which is not like too big of a deal, but it's also, it's a thing. But he does add character stat points to those characteristics, except that it doesn't seem to matter to the game mechanics or like the combat. Like he consistently does like damage for 1,000 points regardless of what level his constitution is. So I'm like, oh, so these numbers don't matter really much at all to like the actual combat of the story. So I'm like, okay, there we go. There were other things which you can read in like the full written review, but basically it didn't really work for me. There are a few things in the story that I liked about it. About the 40% mark of the story. The story does switch. It switches between like just basic adventuring and action stuff to kingdom building and town building. And it was very kind of unexpected, at least for me. I was expecting to continue on the slice of life journey, whether when I was entertained or not, that was my expectation. And then suddenly 40%, ooh, town building. And that's what the rest of the story is. It really does shift its complete focus to town building and kingdom building. And there's less wand-wavy combat. And the story shifts to creating relationships and character building and building the small town. And the writing to be improved quite a bit. Like the game mechanics start to actually feel, these game mechanics specifically, actually start to feel like they matter somewhat to the story. And it gives the author kind of a chance to show off some of these other better writing skills, which includes characters actually having a personality and doing some character development for the main character. And again, the town building mechanics aren't horrible. There's occasional wand-wavy stuff still, but still, like, it's much better than the things that came before it. Overall, the early part of the story just drag it down too much for me to like have really enjoyed the entire thing as a process. Even though after the 40% mark, things really do get much better for me, at least. This is kind of a LitRPG story, but that the RPG mechanics again that are presented aren't always consistently applied or even impactful for the early parts of the story, and that really just made it like not bad, not even boring. It's just not enjoyable for me, at least. That last half of the novel honestly saves it from getting a worse score because the story did improve, but it still gets scored 6 out of 10 for me. So that's Welcome to Eden, LitRPG Gamelit with a score of 6 out of 10. So there you go. Okay, on to Temple of Sorrow. This is Temple of Sorrow, a LitRPG and game adventure, Stonehaven League, book number 1, written by Carrie Summers. So there we go. More giant spiders. Okay, this one is 382 pages, $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Here is the author's description. Devon Walker has one chance to turn her life around. A half-wit ogre, a legion of overgrown jungle beasts, and a power-tripping AI are trying to stop her. Relic Online is the hottest new game out there, and it's Devon Walker's best hope for escaping her hard-knock life. Thanks to her rocking achievements in other games, she's been hired as a salaried player. Even better, her new position comes with cutting-edge implants that turn RO's virtual reality into a full sensory explosion. Her only task: drive the game's creator AI to the outermost limits of its creativity. Sounds easy, right? But when Devon logs in, her expectations shatter like an ice golem hit with a sonic blast. Wearing nothing but a cloth tunic and ragged pants, she spawns inside a ruined city overgrown by steaming jungle. With 0 skills and nothing in inventory but pocket lint, she immediately runs afoul of the city's guardian, a stone giant the size of an apartment building. The encounter does not go well. And Relic Online is just getting started with her. So there we go. Good appropriate price, 382 pages for $3.99. Also in Kindle Unlimited, so all good stuff. The story really does start out with actually the main character in a different MMO. It's one last raid for the main character and her gaming group in their favorite VR MMO that's shutting down that very day. It's actually, while it's an entertaining action scene, but purposely, as far as like the purpose of the bigger story, it's kind of something you can skip. Don't skip it if you don't want to. It's not necessary to skip, but it's one of those things like you can see like afterwards, like, oh, that was just set up. Like it's about a game that's never going to be featured in the entire story again. It's more of a way to insert action in the story immediately. It establishes the main character's gamer cred, and it points out her teammates who may or may not be used in future stories. And that's kind of the purpose of that first little section. Afterwards, the story goes into the Relic Online storyline. And story-wise, it's kind of a chosen one theme going on here, where the main character is handpicked by a lead developer to play this full immersion game, not as a beta tester, but to show off how fun it is. The story that particular premise falls flat a little bit because no one watches her play, and she's not a game streamer. So nobody's watching her in any way, shape, or form. So, but again, it's just a way to get her into the game and to get her like playing full time. So the main character is dropped out of the way zone, and left to figure everything out on her own. She comes across a village of NPCs led by a stupid ogre, falls into a mystery of why a major old city was suddenly abandoned and what she can do about it. There's lots of action, town building in this story. There's questing, and there's well-described relationship building. There's a lot of really interesting stuff, including some intrigue and treachery in the storyline. So story-wise, it's actually rather entertaining. I liked it quite a bit. The author who has a good following. She has 9 fantasy books to her name that she's written, and she straddles the line in the story between full-blown RPG mechanic dump and also fantasy descriptions. And again, she has a following. She doesn't want to alienate by suddenly switching styles. And I think she does a really good job of gradually introducing those game mechanics in the story. But in the beginning of like the Realm Online story arc, that story feels very fantasy described. And it's done purposely again because the author's other series, which she has fans that she's kind of bringing to this genre, they're fantasy series. And so she kind of has to kind of toe that line between like, oh, we're not alienating those readers, but also kind of introducing the game mechanics in the story. And it's very, very gradual. I think you don't see your first character sheet, so somewhere until in the neighborhood like 24-30% into the story. So again, a very kind of gradual, breadcrumb kind of introduction to the game mechanics even when she's in the game. But again, well done as far as I'm concerned. Like eventually the game mechanics get really in depth. She gives you a ton of good information. There's even town building stuff later on that's really well described. The game mechanics themselves, not really new. But the character advancement is detailed. The town building mechanics have enough depth to be interesting and purposeful. The only place I'd say where the game mechanics kind of fall apart, or don't really exist, I should say, is in combat. There, the main character kind of gets a pass on logic sometimes, and not only kind of just wins every single fight, but she comes away from them unscathed. Like she doesn't lose hit points, which seems kind of weird. Especially again in a game where death doesn't really have a penalty. Game mechanic wise in the story, like there's no death penalty at all when you die before like level 10. And even from level 10 to 20, the only penalty for dying is like you lose a little durability on your items. So why the main character can't ever die in the story? I mean, she dies like I think twice in the entire story. But that's out of like really like probably 6 or 7 like really big battles. And why she can't die or even get hit. And like, okay, there's like it's kind of a justification in the story, but to me it's not like enough to say like why you didn't use that mechanic to like make this a learning experience for the character. But again, there's a story choice where the author just kind of graded on my mind. I was like, oh, the game mechanics don't matter when it comes to combat. I was like, oh, okay, that is what it is. It even extends to the points where like the main character is fighting multiple opponents, and sometimes an opponent who's like many times her level, like she's level 2 and the monster's probably about like 8 or 9. It's one of those things where the opponents don't get levels necessarily. But from the amount of experience she gets, like when she beats this monster, she gets 3 levels worth of experience, which to me means like, oh, that monster was probably at least 3 times her level. So if she's level 2, the monster's at least level, 6 to 8, somewhere in there. And yet she beats it by one-shotting it. Even though she does do some preparation, it's like, oh, that's a little wand wave you do. And that occurs again and again in this novel. So, but outside of combat, all the other game mechanics, all the other RPG mechanics work really well. They feel like they matter. So I don't want to put you off saying like this isn't LitRPG. It is. It's just when it comes to the combat stuff, it's a little wand wavy. If that doesn't bother you, there's no reason to even, but for me, like it was a little thing in my brain. I was like, oh, okay. There you go. Okay. Overall, though, I had a good time reading the novel. Again, even though combat feels a little one-wavy, overall, there is a consistent implementation of the game mechanics. The story is interesting enough to get me to read a second book. I had a good time with it. And I think part of this is that the author, she sent me a message when she asked for a review. She's like, oh, you may like this story. She said she was a programmer for MMOs for quite a few years before she started writing. And so maybe that plays into like her consistent lookout for a lot of the game mechanics, but it works for me at least. Gets a score of 7 out of 10. This one would probably be in the level like 7.2, 7.3. Still enjoyable. That's Temple of Sorrow, a LitRPG and Gamelit adventure with a score of 7 out of 10. So there you go. Okay. Here's our next one. God of Life, Mythic Online by D.A. Shepard. Okay, it is 228 pages, $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. A terminal disease, a fantasy universe, a chance at immortality. Derby Baldwin is dying. Rather than spend his last few months in agony, he joins Mythic Online, a virtual world that hijacks his brain and prevents him from feeling pain. The best thing he can hope for, a peaceful death. When he learns he can cheat death by defeating an in-game god, Derby's life suddenly has purpose. He recruits two friends, and together they pursue their enemy. Can he defeat the god to save his own life, or will the disease take him before he succeeds? So there you go. That's the description. Good price for the page count. Good there. Also on Kindle Unlimited again. Okay, so again, Derby is a terminal patient who decides to upload to a game, wakes up to find himself hung on a tree. He cuts himself down and goes to look to see who did it, so he wouldn't have to worry about someone coming after him. Instead, he finds two NPCs that become allies and a jury to challenge the God of Life to a duel. Again, none of this is spoilery, it's on the novel description. If they win, they can restore the destroyed world, but Derby secretly wants to use the wish to get immortality, so he has a bit of a moral conundrum there. And that's the story. That really is what it is. The setup for the story is pretty much finished by the 20% mark in the story, with a bit about the challenging the God of Life to a duel bit, coming out about 46% at the 46% mark. But it's also again in the novel description. After that, though, you can also skip a lot of the story. You could actually go all the way to the 92% mark to see that duel and get the story resolution, and you're not gonna miss much. Like, there's some story in there, but it really does feel like everything between those 2 points is like a series of short story collections. Like, they're in one world here, and they go on this adventure, and then they go through a portal to another world here, and it's steampunk, and the next one is another thing. It's like this vampire Notre Dame thing, and it basically do a bunch of world skipping and a little like almost short story collection telling. It's not to say that's not entertaining. It kind of depends on which section they're in. Sometimes it is a little bit of snooze. Other places like, oh, that was an interesting little bit of storytelling. But again, as far as like being important to the story, it's not. It really, I mean, that's my opinion, of course. It doesn't matter to the story in its context. Like, you really can't go from like, read this first 20%, read the 46% point mark where you get that information about like, oh, if you challenge the God of Life to a duel and you win, you get a wish, and then skip right to 92%, and oh, look, that's a genuinely a good little section of the story, and you get all the good stuff. The combat in the story, it's okay. It's not bad. It's not like particularly amazing. There's a pretty good range of monsters. You get everything from giant insects to golems to the undead, a bunch of things in between. So it's a good variety there. However, like in that middle section, there's not a lot of character growth for the main character. There are no events that make him a better person or make him a better man, or force his decision where he realizes what he really wants to do. The moral issues that he has with this, between choosing immortality selfishly and like saving a world, are there from like the very, very beginning of the story. And they don't really change as far as his moral character choices go. By the end of the novel, like in the novel, he makes a decision and that's the resolution. But like the middle section again doesn't advance that portion of his character growth very much. It's very much again short stories kind of put together, at least to me. So like it doesn't really impact the story as a whole. Like there are little details that you might find interesting, but again, you can kind of skip some of it. The game mechanics in the story, there's not a lot. There really isn't. It is LitRPG. The author has kind of this very light leveling system he incorporates. I mean, and I think he really does do a good job of like trying to make it realistic. Even though this is supposed to be a game, the world itself feel like there's more like portal fiction, and they're worlds with RPG mechanics that rule them. But the game mechanics are supposed to be incorporated like they're real things. For example, when people kill things, when they another character or a monster, instead of like getting experience points like to send to them and get a notification, they get physical chits or physical tokens that they can be traded into innkeepers, who are the only people apparently who can raise your level and increase your stats. And those same innkeepers, when you make your choices, they give you a piece of paper to make those changes official. And without that official piece of paper, those changes apparently don't stick. And so characters can also learn from special mentors who can give you special skills. But again, to make it official, they have to give you a piece of paper that says you learn that particular skill. So again, it's a very interesting way that the author is again trying to ground RPG mechanics in almost a more physical reality sense. But that's kind of all it is. The game mechanics aren't really in depth. You get to see a character sheet with stats, and those stats do seem to have an impact on like the things the characters seem to later on in the story. But those are kind of the only places where you see those game mechanics. The rest of the story is, again, mostly described in a fantasy context, and they kind of ignore game mechanics in a lot of ways. So it feels like it's fantasy story, then a little section about leveling, more fantasy story, section about leveling, maybe get a new ability, more fantasy story, and a little more leveling. And it repeats on that cycle a lot. The level up moments again are consistent in the story. The characters do grow in power, so again, it is technically LitRPG. But for me, the other parts really, they read like a fantasy story, and that just wasn't entertaining for me. Like, I read LitRPG specifically because I like feeling like I'm in a game. Like, I love feeling like these RPG mechanics matter. Like, I'm in my favorite RPG game, or in my favorite RPG tabletop game. So, like, the game mechanics should have an impact on the story. And here, it just feels like, again, it's a fantasy story with occasional breaks for RPG leveling. And the fantasy story parts were just not what were entertaining for me. If I wanted to read a fantasy story, I'd go read a fantasy story. I mean, that's kind of the way I feel about it. So for me, it just wasn't all that entertaining overall. I was kind of bored, again, because the story parts felt more very fantasy driven. They're again, not poorly written or anything. The technical writing is nice. There's story development, all that stuff. But again, I want to read LitRPG. I'm not here to read fantasy stories. That was the thing. So that was the thing for me. So I was kind of bored. It was, again, very neat to see the author trying to meld his super light RPG mechanics realistically, giving them like a physical, entity or physical presence. But again, I wanted to read LitRPG, and this didn't do it for me. Gets a score of 5 out of 10. That's God of Life, Mythic Online, with a score of 5 out of 10. So there you go. Okay, last one, ladies and gentlemen. Probably my favorite, but it's okay. It is Ruins of Majesta, Volume 1, Blood and Cupcakes, written by Taj McCoy L. If you guys are part of the Facebook LitRPG community, whether it's the LitRPG Books, LitRB, or Gamelit communities, you might recognize the name of Taj. He's a community member. He's been here for a while. And, this is his first book that he's written and published. So congratulations to him on that. It's always a big step. And again, I totally forgot to pull in the author's description for this when I was doing my show notes, so I'll have to go pull that up before I continue. Okay, here we go. It is about 550 pages. It is $3.99. It's available on Kindle Unlimited. Here is the author's description. There's no problem a cupcake can't solve. MIT calls her a genius. Her mother calls her Cupcake. Her buddies call her Princess Cuddle Fluff, and she's here to kick butt and blow stuff up. At least until she realizes she's stuck. 11-year-old Maya just collateral damage in an investigation by a government that's intent on keeping control of its finances. Now she's trapped in the virtual reality of Ruins of Majesta, waging the war for her life, the only way she can, by questing, leveling up, and sewing. She's attempting to unravel the mystery of who did this to her and why. She's angry as Shaz, and she's out for blood. The same blood the potential filters won't let her see. So instead, she'd be happy smashing them into a hole with her hammer and tossing in a few grenades for good measure. Involving her in their plans was the worst idea the government cronies ever had. If you're going to be stupid enough to fight a genius, don't. Follow Maya through the ruins of Majesta as she unlocks its mysteries and tries to escape its deadly clutches. This novel is a combination of big hammers, cats, books, enchanting, snark, necromancy, leveling, government conspiracies, financial revolutions, grandmothers, evil, sentient, computer viruses, crafting, duels, getting gear, friendship, happiness, and sweet, sweet XP. Now, the author actually did intentionally write this with children in mind. Maybe this is a little spoiler, I guess, but the impetus for this novel was he had a conversation with his daughter about like, oh, what would it be like to live in a video game? And they had a great conversation. Apparently it inspired this novel. Like, oh, what would it be like for a kid to be trapped in a video game? And so this novel is very much geared towards like, oh, being safe for children. There's no cursing. There's no like sex stuff, nothing like that. And there's actually apparently inside the game, a game filter that even filters out the gore for the main character. So there you go. So I enjoyed it though. So here is my review of Full Disclosure again. I received an advance copy for review. I was more than happy to purchase a copy of this novel when it became available. It was quite entertaining. Though this is a trapped in the game, slice of life story with cyberpunk subthreads. That's how I can describe it in a sentence. There's lots of good action, but a good portion of the story is about crafting, which I personally love. But I also understand that everybody is as into crafting as I am. But there's also a lot of other things in the novel to enjoy. Now, here are some of the things that I actually really did enjoy about the story. First of all, character building, character development, really well done, especially in the beginning. Like the author does a really good job of like efficiently describing and establishing personalities for the main character, for her family. Like it's kind of a great relationship that the kid has. Her parents are involved in her life. She has an older brother, and you can kind of see the great relationship that they have. But even more than that, you get a kind of really in-depth look about how Maya thinks what her life is as like a child genius. She's an 11-year-old black girl. She's a child genius among gifted high school students, but she's a fierce kid that will stand up to people who will talk down to her or try to take advantage of her because she's 11. She's smart enough to see like through the like BS that most adults put out, and she's kind of a little jaded about it because of it. But at the exact same time, she's still a kid. And she doesn't even recognize when she develops her first cross until her wiser, more emotionally mature mom points it out to her. And I think that's a really difficult balance to have for intelligent children. Because I was in education, and you run across some very super intelligent children sometimes, and they are smart to see that a lot of the rule is fake. A lot of the rules are just there because, and that people say differently than they act, and that they're kind of hypocrites sometimes. And being super intelligent can kind of be a burden for them because they see kind of behind the curtains a little bit too much. But at the same time, they're still kids. And so emotionally and experientially, they aren't as prepared for some of the things that happen in the world as their intelligence would sometimes dictate that they should be. You know what I mean? And I think the author did a really good job of like showing that capacity and those kind of concepts for his main character. Like I thought it was really, really well done. The storytelling in the beginning did a really good job like making you love this character. Like honestly, if I'm married, I don't have kids though, and if I had a kid, I would want this to be my kid. Like this is a super awesome main character of a kid. So I totally fell in love with the character. There are a few places in the story where you might feel like, oh, that's a little weird that little girl should say that. And so it kind of breaks that character a little bit, and you kind of see like, oh, that's more of the author, I think, than like the main character. For example, like when the 11-year-old girl starts making "that's what she said" jokes, I'm like, funny, but not maybe in character. So that it is what it is. But again, other than like a few of those moments, the main character, his personality is very consistent. Okay, other thing I liked about the story, crafting. Boys, they're crafting in this story, and it's so good. Like it really is in depth, and they're like great ideas and combinations of trade skills and magics, and like there's so much good crafting, ladies and gentlemen. If you're a crafting fan, and if you like crafting that matters to your story, this is definitely super fun. If you're into that kind of thing, like there's a pretty good portion of the story that's like, oh, that kind of stuff. So there's also some good training scenes. So if you like those like DBZ training scenes, there are several of those in here too that you're going to enjoy. The main character, or the author, I should say, also does good secondary character development. So while there are other characters in the story, I love the main character the most. But these other characters are still very interesting. They each have their own personalities. They have their own flaws, and they have their own kind of character arcs that they go through in the story. So they're all really well developed. The author doesn't make anybody feel unimportant in the main cast. So he does a really good job of developing them and having their own like personalities mesh well with like a group kind of experience. So everybody feels really well developed. The gaming mechanics story, very thoroughly described, and they feel like they matter to the story, which is kind of one of those prerequisites for me for like really enjoying a LitRPG story is when the game mechanics matter. Fundamentally, there's not like a lot new here on like a fundamental game mechanic level. You have your character sheets, stats that are, familiar to you. Skills get improved when they train, or when like they can pay for improvement, they can pay for training, or they can use like skill points. Skills can be learned or purchased. Excuse me. Magic is one of the few things that is restricted by level. However, what the story does do is combine these familiar mechanics into something deeper and something more entertaining. And the main character is, because she's super intelligent, she actually recognizes the rules for what they are and sees kind of the boundaries. And she exploits almost every single loophole she can find to her advantage. I think that's one of the things that the author does well, is that he's already set up a super intelligent main character. And so why wouldn't that main character, who understands the logic system, who's genius level intelligence, why wouldn't she use all these loopholes? She just happens to see that other people don't. And it's very entertaining to see how the author has her bend those mechanics a little, bend those rules so that they work to her advantage. So good stuff. The only kind of place I would kind of see like, more explanation would have helped, was kind of understanding the difference between stats and attributes. They're, for some reason on the character sheet, they're separated, and characters get separate points for each, but it's not really a good explanation of why they're separated or what applying points specifically to each either stat or attribute really means. And it kind of doesn't help the main character hoards her stats and attribute points like near the end part of the story. So there's no real natural place for it to be addressed. Like, she starts getting these stat points in the beginning, but because she doesn't apply them for a good portion of the story, it's like, there's no real natural place to say, this is what this stuff means. This is what their actual implementation means. It's just something that's not really addressed. And I think like a little bit more of an explanation would have made it clear in my brain what those things mean. Small thing though, really tiny thing. Things I think could have been done better in the story. Again, nothing that ruins the story for me, but there are just like these things like, okay. The cyberpunk stuff. Again, there are cyberpunk themes to the story. I'm not really a big fan of it in general. It's not like poorly done here, but in general, it really never makes sense to me why you have coding problems, why they can only be solved inside of a game. Like, if you have coding problems, they can be solved with coding, right? Why do I have to send somebody or something into the game to fix that code problem? I don't know. It's a really common theme among cyberpunk stories. And while the cyberpunk story in the story, whether it's werewolves or game stuff, it's interesting. It's not like not poorly done here. There's also not a lot of resolution for it. A lot of the cyberpunk stuff really does have more to deal with like the werewolf stuff. And again, it ends up at the finish. I'm like, I was expecting more resolution by the end, and I just didn't get it. So I later eventually realized, this is just a bunch of setup for book 2 and book 3. Like, these are like story plans, and these are things that are exciting your imagination and keeping you interested in the real life stuff. Also having the main character kind of go on these slice of life adventures inside of the game. But they're not going to be resolved in this book. So I'm like, that was like a little like, disappointing. Like, nothing, no resolution. I'm like, okay, that is what it is. It's, again, not boring. It's just like, there wasn't more resolution. And so I was like, okay, that's what it was. I really thought the Avatar virus thing was a bit of a waste of an opportunity for character growth, just a personal opinion. And also the story could use better antagonists. There are a couple that are introduced in the story, but when they're actually used, they feel like they're one-shot characters. And there's no one really in the story that turned out to be like a foil for the MC, or for the main character, I should say. So I think that was something that could have been developed just a little bit better. Overall, though, I had a really good time with the story. Again, even those small little things that I got that could have been better, they were well done. Like, the story on the whole, really entertaining. A lot of things that I really enjoyed about it. There are a few places where I think the story could have been trimmed out a little bit. It's kind of a massive novel. But like I said, really good action, really good storytelling, amazing main character, good crafting. There's a lot of good stuff here. I'll note that there's a little bit of a cliffhanger at the end. And the only reason I mention it because I know some people it's going to bug some people. But for me, it just makes me want to read book 2 better, or say volume 2 better. So I had a good time with it. Gets a score of 7 out of 10 for me. That's from Majesta. On the scale, I probably give it like a 7.6.7 maybe. I really had a good time with it. It's just a few things, like I said, that kind of stopped it from being great in my opinion, but I said it really super good for me at least. With the score of 7 out of 10 for Ruins of Majesta Volume 1, Blood and Cupcakes. There you go. That's it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for hanging out with me. That's the end of this show. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Patreon, or our webpage. All the places you can go hang out with us. And of course, if you want to support the podcast, in any way, shape, or form, whether it's sharing the show on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, whatever, or just like subscribing on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter. Those are all great ways to support the podcast. You can find out all the ways to do so at litrpgpodcast.com/support, because without your support, honestly, this show doesn't exist. If you guys don't watch, if you guys don't support us, we have no purpose in life. So thank you very much for listening, for hanging out with me today, ladies and gentlemen. And until we can hang out again, folks, remember to go read some LitRPG. Goodbye, everybody.